In this video, I'll show some different methods on how to put a brass and black finish onto steel. For my latest project, I'm making a mallet. I'm part way through. This is the head for it. I still need to put it on the lathe and turn it down. And then I'm going to add a metal ring to prevent it from splitting when it's in use. I was going to do that with a piece of brass tube and cut a ring out of it. I can't find any brass tube anywhere locally. And then a supporter on Patreon told me a method where you can add a brass coating to steel. It's very easy to do, and I'll show you how to do it. For a test piece, I'm cleaning up a piece of steel angle, and the better the finish here, the better the finish will be after the brass coating. But saying that, it doesn't need to be highly polished, it just needs to get the scratches out, and I'm sanding it to 180 grit. There's one step left to do before we apply the brass, and that's to thoroughly clean it, and to do that I'm using acetone. And for the brass, we'll use a brass wire brush. It has to be brass and not brass coated. And to eliminate any chance of contamination from oil or grease, it's a good idea to use a new one. Then all we need to do is put some heat into it. I'm using a regular propane torch. It doesn't actually need to get that hot. I'm just doing it until it turns a straw colour, and then I use the wire brush and start brushing away, and some of the brass off those bristles will transfer onto the surface of the steel. It's surprising how well it works, even though it's not proper brass plating. It is just a thin layer being brushed on, but it looks really good and it does feel durable. I wouldn't know how durable over time, but I can't see why it wouldn't be, especially if you oil or wax it afterwards to keep it protected. A better way would be to use a drill or an angle grinder attachment. You get more brass on faster. I could only find brass coated ones locally, so I had to manage with a regular wire brush, but as you can see, that still works pretty well. That's not too bad at all. It's only my second go at it. It's a little bit light here and there, so I'll heat it up again and see if I can add some more brass to it. Some of you probably already know this technique, but I'd never seen it before, so I'm sure others haven't either, and I thought it was worth sharing. It really is very effective and easy to do, and although it already looked amazing, I sanded the opposite side of the angle to a higher grit at 600 just for test purposes and to see if that looked any different. I couldn't tell any difference between the two sides, so I don't think it needs to be sanded to a higher grit. I think it looks great either way. Anyway, that's the brass done. Now on to some blackening, or better known as bluing because of its bluish black appearance. I've got 4 test pieces and it's the same as with the brass. They need thoroughly cleaning to remove any grease or fingerprints. For the first one, we'll do a hot bluing technique using oil. Any type of oil can be used, but for this one, I'm going to use boiled linseed oil. Heat it up with a regular blowtorch until the colour of the steel changes. Don't get too hot as it won't work. If it's glowing red, then it's far too hot. Anywhere between a straw and a blue colour will work. With large parts, you'll have to wipe it on with a clean rag or a clean brush. So I'm showing that here, but with a small piece like this, you could just drop it into a container of oil. If you carefully add a little more heat and wipe it again with the oil, then you can make it even more black. You need to be careful with this though, because you can fry the finish if you add too much heat, so it's best to practice on a piece of scrap first. And I should mention that once it's blackened and it's been sealed properly, then it'll stop it rusting for a long time to come. That turned out pretty good. Now I'll do the same again, but this time I'll use WD-40. Even though it isn't the easiest thing to do, try and get the heat as even as you can for the best results. That one turned out more blue, and you can see it wasn't that even, but it still looks okay, and I'm sure with practice you could do a better job than me. And we'll do one last test of hot bluing, but this time we'll drop it into the oil, and for that I'm using vegetable oil. I decided to wipe it down with acetone and give it a second go just to make it even more black. Now on to cold bluing, and this is just a case of applying the solution onto the clean steel, leaving it for 30 seconds before rinsing it in water. It needs to be rinsed as the chemicals will keep working and it will end up a brown colour and look like rust. Lastly, it needs oiling. You can either drop it in some oil and leave it a while, or just give it a good saturation, or you can just wipe some on, leave it a while, wipe some more on, and do that several times. And here's all the test pieces next to each other for comparison. I think they're all usable. The cold bluing one is the most even, so that's the one I like the best. Saying that though, my technique wasn't the best, and maybe you could get more even results if you give it a go. This last method is a bit rustic and it's a bit hit and miss, but it's good for larger pieces of furniture. I use a rust converter and just apply it to the mild steel, still with the mill scale on. Because the only preparation is to clean it with acetone, it saves time grinding off the mill scale. I leave the solution on for about 30 minutes before rinsing, and then when it's dry, hit it with a couple of coats of clear spray. I probably didn't leave this quite long enough, but here's a couple of clips from an old video where I show the method in use. If you leave it longer, it can get pretty interesting with all sorts of colours happening. A couple of years ago, I made a dining table for a mate and we left it overnight. That one ended up with blue streaks through it and it looked really cool. And here's the brass rings for the mallet I'm making, and I also did a black one as well, just for a test. Hopefully that was useful to someone, and I encourage you to just have a go at it and experiment. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.